Good afternoon and thank you. And wow, I am so privileged and so honored to be sharing this afternoon with all of you and these incredibly amazing women that have been honored today. I would like to extend my congratulations to each one of you: Octavia, Michelle, Kelly, Patty, and all 50 women that have been included in the Impact Report. Your achievements not just inspire me, but also so many others to work harder, to be better, and to make a dent wherever we can. So I'm very, very proud to be standing alongside you. So in life, there are moments when you stop and ask yourself, how did I get here? Like, why am I standing here? Well, this is definitely one of those moments for me where I find myself going back to the beginning, back to my roots. I was born to incredible parents, amazing parents who served as doctors in the Indian Army. I was the firstborn, and as far back as I can remember, I made my parents very proud and happy. 99% of the time. Okay, slight exaggerations of personal achievements allowed from time to time, don't you think? My brother was born a few years later, and even then, nothing changed for me. We were both given equal opportunities, and I would emphasize this. I really wanted to emphasize this because I don't think a lot of people might understand that being equal might seem very normal, but where I come from, India, and most of the developing countries around the world, more of not, this is an exception. It's actually a privilege. My first experience of the glaring disparities between boys and girls came at a very, very young age. I grew up in a middle-class family and to extremely philanthropic parents who constantly reminded me and my brother how lucky we were and how giving back to those who were less fortunate was not a choice. It was a way of life. Simple. I was 7 or 8 years old when my parents started taking me on these visits to a traveling clinic to developing communities around. We were packed into this ambulance and my parents would provide free medical care to those who couldn't afford it. My job at the age was an assistant pharmacist. Now, I'd count all the medicines, put them in an envelope and give it out to patients, and I really took my job very seriously. Very seriously. But the more I went on these expeditions, the more I began to notice the simplest things that distinguished a boy from a girl or a man from a woman. For example, girls were pulled out of schools when they hit puberty because they were considered ready for marriage and babies. That's 12 and 13, while boys still enjoyed their childhood. Our basic human rights such as healthcare were denied just because they were women. Let's call this whole experience trigger number 1 for me. Fast forward a few years and many triggers in between. Like a producer director, for example, early on in my career, I must have been about 18 or 19, telling me that if I didn't agree to the ridiculous terms or painfully low salary in his movie, that it would just replace me because girls are replaceable in the entertainment business. That was a memorable one, made me decide to make myself irreplaceable. But I think what really moved the needle in me and ultimately led me to create the Priyanka Chopra Foundation for Health and Education, and around the same time partner with the UNICEF, was an encounter with my housekeeper's daughter. About 12 years ago, I was early from set one day and she was sitting in my library reading a book. She must have been about 8 or 9 years old and I knew she loved reading. So I went and asked her. I was like, it's a weekday, why aren't you in school? And she said, oh, I don't go to school anymore. So I went and asked her mother and I said, why isn't she in school? And her mom replied that she couldn't afford to send her and her brothers to school, so they chose the boys. The reason: she would eventually get married and would be a waste of money. I was completely blown and shook me to my core. Eventually, I decided to cover up the cost of her education so that she could continue to learn, because education is a basic human right and a huge necessity, especially today. From that point on, I was determined to make a difference in as many children's lives as possible, in whatever big or small way that I could contribute. This is really beautiful quote that I read recently, and I think it's absolutely appropriate to explain what I'm trying to say today. The hand that rocks the cradle, the procreator, the mother of tomorrow, a woman shapes the destiny of civilization. Such is the tragic irony of fate that a beautiful creation such as a girl child is today one of the gravest concerns facing humanity. Girls have the power to change the world. It is a fact, and yet today, girls are more likely than boys and never to set foot in a classroom. Despite all the efforts and progress made over the last 2 decades, I'm just going to give you a stat, more than 15 million girls of primary school age never knew how to read or write compared to 10 million boys. Primary school, it's the beginning of our future. Over the last 11 years, I've witnessed firsthand the incredible work that UNICEF does for children around the world, especially for victims and survivors of child marriage, displacement, war, sexual violence. There's still so much work to do, and that's the fuel to my fire. The reason I'm so committed to this cause, and that's where my passion stems from, because I know that girls' education not just empowers families but communities and economies. The result of our education, we all do better. It's just as simple as that. As entertainers and influencers sitting in this room, I think it is our social responsibility to be a voice for the voiceless. For your platform, your voice, to contribute, to change, and to ensure that there is not even one lost generation as long as we're alive. I would like to thank Variety and all of you for encouraging me and all of us in this room to keep going and fighting on. Thank you so much.